this last week. Family, groups, loyalty, that's their big thing. Calms any sense of insecurity by being both productive and fun-loving. Has a good sense of humor, quick-witted and energetic, imaginative. So some of these qualities are the same as what we've talked about. They focus on life as positive. Wants to create joy, make the world better. So that sort of loyalty to their friends and to the group. What they want to do then for the group is sort of make life fun for them. It can deplete the self by being overactive, because again they can get dragged into trying to do too much. Manic when unhealthy. So we've mentioned this before, that for each of the 9 types, you can do a correlation with mental health diagnoses, with some at least. And so the 7, frenetic, active, going, it can become manic. And again, that's not to say that others can't be manic, but it could be something that can happen to the 7. Outgoing, cooperative, is more relationship-oriented than the 7 with an 8 wing. And so now we switch over to the 7 with an 8 wing. So the thing we know then about 8s is that they're very strong, they're very powerful, and that have that forward energy that's in your face, and it can be more like a punching energy. So they're enthusiastic and they're challenging. They pick up that quality from the 8. They achieve desires by combining forcefulness with their fun-loving style. So that could be experienced as a sort of a bullying. They're trying to get you excited and want you to go to whatever they're going to, and you're like, this isn't really my cup of tea. But they want to drag you along because they're enthusiastic and they want you to be enthusiastic. So there's a kind of a forcefulness. Generally, they're success-oriented, seeks to accumulate and enjoy resources, can be more impatient and blunt, may be attracted to positions of power. So again, imagine if your boss is a 7 and they're really pushing you and challenging you all the time. That can be a difficult energy to be in, to work with. When healthy, can be very loyal, generous, and a protective friend. So they'll use that powerful part of the 8 energy to be protective of you, their friend. So they can come across as more aggressive, determined, and self-reliant than the 7 with the 6 wing. And they can be workaholics. Okay. All right, so now we move on to what they call the lines, the line N-E-S, and what this calls the heart point and the stress point. This is the point of integration, the point of disintegration. So we start with the heart point. This is where 7 goes to for integration, for healthier choices in lifestyle. They go to the 5, which the 5 energy, if you can remember back 2 or 3 weeks ago, is the energy of hoarding knowledge. The owl is the symbol for the 5. They're quieter, they're observing, they're taking it all in, and they have that hoarding. That's why number 5, Santa Claus had his cookies and he wasn't sharing. And I always feel that is a bad rap for the 5s, because it's not so much about not sharing cookies. It's more about they want to retain the knowledge and be the wise one, so that it's kind of a power game. They feel in control then. So it's not so much about material hoarding necessarily. So when 7 goes to 5, they become more focused. They gain some depth. They're not just flitting up here like the butterfly and skimming the surface. They gain a desire to understand the deeper meaning of life. So there's more of an openness then to look perhaps at the challenges of life. Consumption is slowed, because the 5, if you remember, is the ascetic, is the monk. is the one who controls their environment by minimalist. You know, it's the Scandinavian design furniture. You know, there's not a lot of clutter and all of that. So the 7 would sort of go more in that direction. It's not about accumulating things and having all these experiences and consuming all this stuff. I wonder if 7 spend a lot of time on Amazon Prime. Just thinking. Might be a possibility. You don't have to put your hand up.
Only with a smile.
Only when it's smile. Very good. We get a percentage when it's smile. Thank you. Engages in contemplative practices. Accepts stillness. So that's a great practice for the 7, is stillness. You know, instead of flitting about and running about, to actually just sit and be still. So I can imagine that illness and surgeries and things like that must be very anxiety-provoking for 7s, because you're going to have to sit in that chair or be in that bed for how many weeks, and you can't be running around. So what are you going to do? Binge watch, whatever. Or you could practice a meditative practice of being still, being in the stillness. So when they move to the 5 personality, they become more introverted, more introspective, and it says may even become shy. Interesting. The downside is they can get lost then in the minutiae, and that complicates their decision making. So they're used to like quick decision making. Let's get her done, you know, get it lined up. And now as the 5, you're gathering more information. So that's a whole 180 for you. And that can really slow down their decision making then, that makes sense. All right, so the 7s can go to the 1 when they're stressed. And see, this is the exact opposite. The 1 goes to the 7 when they're in their great place. And now it's the exact opposite for the 7s. They go to the 1. They go to the critical, the reformer, the judging. So when 7 goes to 1, they become critical and judgmental. Agitated with anyone or anything that limits freedom. And again, that's a real button for them, is their sense of freedom. They don't like to be nailed down. Becomes methodical, tendency to become picky or rigid. So they're picking up on the judgmentalism and the criticism of the 1. Sense of humor diminishes, so there's like a retraction of their energy. So sarcasm can take its place. I don't know if that rings true for anyone. Thinking becomes black or white. Black or white is more pessimistic. The upside of going to the 1, even though it's the stress point, is that they benefit from structure and personal responsibility. So it's calling them out, if you will, to be a little bit more responsible. Okay, any hands up? Right here. Growth. Okay. So as we've said, the virtue that they're looking for is sobriety or moderation. The ability to stay with the bad as well as the good. The ability to let go of endless possibilities in order to attend to immediate priorities. Be in the now. I notice on our Wi-Fi, one of the names of one of our neighbors' Wi-Fi is "Be Here Meow." I thought that was quite funny. So the higher mind, better thinking, is work. Ability to commit completely to a single course of action, stay focused, and carry through. So if there was sort of a training wheel or program for sevens, it would be, okay, plan something, stay with it, stay focused, and stay with it to the end. And so if you develop that then as a habit every day, like, you'll be much more grounded. You can still do a lot of the things that you want to do, but this is where you can really grow. At their best, sevens are joyous and productive people, able to reach out to others with a sense of awe about the wonder of life. And again, if you know any sevens, they're busy people, because there's a lot going on, and the old saying that if you want to have something done, ask someone who's busy, because they'll do it. The gifts of the seven are fun, playful, enjoyable, inventive, because of their busy minds. They're imaginative, they're optimistic, enthusiastic, they're accomplished, appreciative, they celebrate life, they're really good with creative possibilities, they're good networkers, emotionally inspirational, and they have this ability to make people happy. Okay. And then here's a little, not a koan exactly, but something to ponder for the seven. If you realize that you can keep your focus even in the face of pain, what would your life be like? So that's something that they haven't given a lot of thought to. They just sort of tend to think of their life without integrating the pain. But this is a way for them to imagine, which of course opens up the possibility of change. Well, what if I allowed for pain? How would that integrate into my life? So that's a very good question for them to ponder. How to accept pain and limitation and live in the present moment while still having a fulfilling life of possibilities. Because again, that word possibilities that's a word that lights up for sevens. What's possible, who I can be, who I can become. Deal with the associated gluttony of the mind. So, you said, what does that mean? Well, that overstimulated mind, it's like they're not satisfied with the things that they're already thinking about and planning and doing. It's more, what else? And so it's a gluttony. That's why I say it's not like food, or, it can be, but it's not necessarily. So the growth path then, pick something, commit to it and stick with it and follow through. So there you go. And isn't that true for all of us? So again, we broaden this out. This isn't just for the sevens, it's for all of us. Slow down, stay in the moment, stop fantasizing, stop rationalizing, be in the moment. Learn to accept the negative and dull as well as the positive. And isn't that a great time in our life when we don't have to be overstimulated, that we can just be, and that feels as good as all of the high moments that we've had in our life. She just thought that was hysterical, what I just said. That's great. Instead of escaping, experience negative feelings somatically in the body. Be in your body, breathe in to the pain. Practice self-discipline. Stay focused on one subject at a time. I imagine it must be very hard for sevens, to develop an ability like music, which is so challenging. If you want to learn to play the piano, it's like that. There's commitment there, and yet you play the piano, but you haven't learned it.
You just don't read the music.
See, you just don't read the music. You just play by ear. We're not going to spend all those time doing practice and all of that. So, for the seven to grow, open your heart, develop spiritually, practice stillness and silence. And again, because of the sort of more chatty Cathy energy, being silent is also challenging. I mean, isn't this fun to think of, like when you think back when you were a kid, maybe there was a 7 in the family, and they always got into trouble for talking, or they were the one in the class who the teacher was always like, you know.
It's still true.
It's still true, okay. So, you know, the chatty Cathy, they're probably a 7. And it's just, you know, think back. Validate others' feelings, other people's feelings. Don't jump to an uplifting reframe. And that can be a challenge for the 7, because, you know, if you're, what was that cartoon figure? If you have the cloud over your head and the 7 meets you, the 7 will try and blow that cloud away and, oh, don't feel that way. You know, come on, let's go and do this. And so they can invalidate your feelings. So just understand that that's why they're doing it, because they don't like dealing with negative, heavy stuff. Develop and then take care of deep and meaningful relationships. So again, the tendency can be for the 7, it's kind of like that, you know, love at first sight. It's like you dive right into the relationship, and then when the other person, of course, is really hooked, then you're like, I'm bored. Who else is available? Let's move on. You know. So again, it's that jumping in, staying with it, and, you know, seeing it through. That can be challenging. And it's not to say that people, you know, these are tendencies, right? I'm not saying that 7s can't have enduring relationships. They can. But that's the challenge that they may be experiencing. They value maturity and personal growth. Be serious when needed. So, you know, it's great to have all that up energy, but sometimes you do also need to be more serious. Focus on others. Develop a consistent experience of empathy. You know, balance out your own joy and excitement and all of that with having empathy for where other people are at, especially your family, your spouse, whatever groups you're in. Okay. Tips. How to get along with a 7. Bring a bottle of wine, a cake, and good music, and you're all set. Go shopping. Yeah. Dream with me about the possibilities. Yeah, so, you know, we can all join them. We can go into their energy field and think about the possibilities. Don't try to control me. I run from traps. You know, so don't try to nail them down too much. In the creative phase, leave practicality out. So it's you know, it's not initially about planning and strategizing the whole thing out. It's just the bigger picture. It's the feeling. It's the dream. You know, all of that. Go with that with them. Frame feedback as a growth opportunity. So if you're trying to sell them on something, you know, you can do that by saying, well, you know, this is a chance for you to grow into something else, to expand. No, I'm slow to commit, it scares me. So, you know, if you're dating someone who's a 7, just be aware that it feels like, you know, their options and possibilities are beginning to limit and the walls are beginning to kind of close in a bit. So it's not that they're not interested, but it's their anxiety starts to rise. So just know that about them. Laugh with me. Give me space to tell my stories. They love to entertain us with their stories. Plan a fun trip with me. Be adventurous. Nothing better. Hit the road. Let's take a road trip. Let's go to Disneyland. Disney World. Show me physical affection. I soak it up. Share lively, thought-provoking discussions. Show me you are self-reliant and passionate. So again, it's kind of like they're wanting to be very self-determined and in control and providing for themselves. So they kind of want you to do that too. They don't want you to be a drain on them, a buzzkill. Okay. At work, they're assets. They're high energy and have a great sense of optimism. They're very intelligent, have a curious and excitable nature. They're able to plan and see the best possible outcomes. They're good communicators. They're able to communicate that, and they do it naturally, just energetically. They communicate their enthusiasm and their passion for life and for projects. Can motivate others to teamwork and goals. They can be very good for the catalyst for getting the fire going, and then suddenly you turn around and they're not there anymore. It's like, well, where did they go? Well, they're moved on to the next project. But they've given themselves, they've given their best self and gifts to getting the thing going. Skilled at discovering new and creative options. All right, on the board, you're going to be our person discovering new and creative options for the coming year.
My pleasure.
Your pleasure, see? Exactly. Whereas I'm not really, I always say I'm not a creative thinker. Don't ask me to come up with original ideas. Challenges at work. Follow through, be practical. Don't tease others or tell them to lighten up. Stay steady when the path gets boring and tedious. Stay the course. Don't let planning surpass your resources or your options. That's good. That's really good advice. Otherwise, there's a sense of burning out. If your reach is beyond your ability, then that gets frustrating after a while. Honor the importance of deadlines and co-workers. Yeah, and take a breath sometimes. And maybe keep the conversation a little shorter. That might be very helpful. People will appreciate it. Okay. So then, any questions, any comments from the sevens? So, the subtypes. Now again, we talked about this with the other numbers, that there are 3 subtypes. There's the self-preservation, the social, and what we call the one-to-one or intimate. So the passion, as we said, of type 7 is gluttony. The 3 sevens each represent a different way of expressing that passion of gluttony. The self-preservation 7, which is the one who is a little more insecure, more anxious and protective, finds security through a gluttonous search for pleasure, satisfying opportunities, and a network of allies. The social sevens express a kind of anti-gluttony through being of service to others. Now last week, if you remember, we talked about the phobic and the counter-phobic. So in a sense, there's a little bit of that here, that it's a counter energy to most sevens. It's kind of anti-gluttony, and we'll get into that. And then the 1-to-1 7 channels gluttony into an idealistic search for the ultimate relationship and the best imaginable experiences. So there's sort of like a higher qualitative goal for everything. Right, so self-preservation subtypes. The keepers of the castle is sort of the line that's used. Self-preservation sevens are people who express gluttony through making alliances. They typically collect around them a kind of a family network in the sense of banding together and creating a good mafia or partisan group. They rely only on those they trust. There's an element of self-interest in the alliance the self-preservation 7 makes that can be denied by them or is unconscious in someone who has this characteristic. Self-preservation 7s are very practical and good at getting what they want and finding a good deal. They tend to be opportunistic, self-interested, pragmatic, calculating, and very good at networking. Having many close relationships is something they view as an investment. So their approach to relationships then is investment. This is like a bank. I'm storing away, for the future. This is a person who readily recognizes opportunity for creating an advantage. So they see possibilities, advantage. In this way, gluttony expresses itself in an excessive concern to make a good deal at every opportunity. So it's almost like they're always scanning for the best option, the best deal. They'll always have their nose to the wind to sniff out a good deal. There are few conversations that don't lead to business of some kind. It's like transactional. The self-preservation 7 is cheerful, talkative, amiable, with traits that resemble a hedonistic playboy type of personal style, or playgirl, I guess. Being pleasure-loving, they are fun to be with, but they tend to be disconnected from their emotions and may look out for their own self-interest at others' expense. The self-preservation 7 and the 1-to-1 7 occupy opposite ends of the spectrum on several different character dimensions. There's a polarity between the heightened idealism of the 1-to-1 7 and the lack of idealism in the self-preservation 7. And between the gullibility or suggestibility characteristic of the 1-to-1 7 and the cynical distrust of the self-preservation. So the self-preservation is always that more, not sure. The 1-on-1 can be more gullible. Another polarity between these two subtypes exists between being too much of a dreamer, which is the 1-to-1, and being more materialistic and pragmatic, which is the self-preservation. The dominant trait of the self-preservation 7 stands out as a combination of a love of pleasure, self-interest, in contrast with the evasion of concreteness of the 1-to-1 7 and the helpfulness of the social 7. So you're picking up on those subtle differences. So this makes the self-preservation 7 a more sensuous, earthy, and less idealistic character than, say, the 1-to-1 7. So in working on themselves, the self-preservation 7 can move towards sobriety through observing and owning self-interest. So to become aware when they're not really being sensitive to others. And this is all about their own motivations. And opportunistic tendencies, noticing that they also are doing that a lot. And noticing how self-interested behavior and the habit of downplaying feelings may impact their relationships and their goals. Okay, the social subtype. And it says, the word being used for them is sacrifice. So this is interesting, because you can see how this sort of is different all of a sudden. Social 7s represent a kind of a pure character who, as the 7 counter type, express a kind of counter gluttony. They are conscious and concerned about not exploiting others. It's as if they can sense the tendency within themselves towards gluttony, and they decide instead to define themselves as anti-gluttony. If gluttony is a wish for more, a wish for taking advantage of all you can get from a situation, there is a hint of exploitation in gluttony. But the social subtype, being the counter type, wants to be pure, wants to avoid being excessive or excessively opportunistic, wants to be good, and so actively works against any tendency they may have to exploit others. Now, that sounds very much like the 1, wants to be good, fair, you need to be fair with everybody, can't, not be fair. So, if the 7 with a social subtype goes to 1, perhaps they'll really pick up that energy also more. This subtype expresses a kind of ascetic or a 5-ish ideal. They make a virtue of getting by on less for themselves. They typically give others more and take less for themselves as a way of going against the gluttonous desire for more in an effort to prove their goodness. Gluttony is thus difficult to see in the social sevens because they strive to hide it in altruistic behavior. This purifies them from the guilt of feeling an attraction to pleasure or toward their own advantage. So isn't that interesting? Purifies them from guilt. Social sevens take on responsibility in the group or the family, and in doing so express the sacrifice of gluttony for the benefit of others, like a postponement of their own desires. So you can see how healthy this is. They are enthusiastic, idealistic visionaries who imagine a better, freer, healthier, more peaceful world. The name is sacrifice, and sacrifice means a willingness to be of service. It's a sacrifice of gluttony, a relative sacrifice, not the same kind of sacrifice of other kinds of types or personalities, like the 4 or the 2. Social sevens want to be seen as good for their sacrifice, so they want that to be noted. They're altruistic. They create being seen as a good person as defined by social consensus. While this character is good and pure, this position also has ego rewards. They can be appreciated, there's recognition, having a good image, reducing conflicts, and creating debts in others. So they're building up some, what's the word? Points. They're building up some points, yeah. There's a generalized tendency in this social subtype to adopt the role of helper, to be of service, and to be concerned with the alleviation of pain. Because of this desire to be of service, social service sevens can look like 2s. And you can see how that could be, because it seems like they're doing for others. So maybe if you're having a challenge figuring out if you're a 2 or a 7, maybe there's a subtype there, and maybe it's your, the social subtype of 7 and not a 2. That reminds me. Remind me to tell you about something that's a pretty good test that may help you if you're still unsure of what your number is. In working on themselves, people with this subtype can move towards sobriety through making their motives conscious when being helpful to others and being more aware of the glutton, anti-glutton polarity to see how it operates to mask a fear of specific feelings. It also helps them to decriminalize selfishness and notice how conflict and darker motives are avoided. Okay, type 7, 1-to-1 subtype, suggestibility. Individuals with this 1-to-1 7 subtype are gluttons for things of the higher world, for idealization. This subtype is very idealistic and can be somewhat naive, in contrast to the self-preservation 7, who's pragmatic. This person is heavenly and not earthly. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking of that nun in Hawaii. The 7 is a dreamer with a need to imagine something better than stark, ordinary reality. This character is more of a